of things, in fact. And that's why globalization is having a very important, in fact, role to play in that. And in fact, I was there in the inaugural session, and where Professor Sastry was saying that globalization is not new. No doubt it's not new. But when we are taking recourse to globalization in the present context, the whole frame is altogether a different one. So it's not as if we do not have good repository of knowledge. No, we do have. But the question is, that particular repository of knowledge could not come into any discourse. And that's why number of things, in fact, they are not there with us. So today's session, in fact, education, accessibility, and impact of pandemic, this is very important. In fact, pandemic has created a very difficult situation, in fact, all around. And the most important domain that is affected by that is education. Primarily, in fact, for the Indian society, because we were there at that particular stage with the Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan and other important programs, so that we can get more enrollments, in fact, and we were reaching near to our goal. But this 2 years difficult time period, in fact, has created an havoc, and how that momentum that we have maintained through different programs and policies, how that will regain, that's the important challenge. And let's see what are the important challenges. Number of papers I was going through, they are there with reference to different domains of education. So let's see how the things will work. I hand over the things to Naseem. So what you do, Professor Naseem, you just call one by one the presenters, and after completion of the session, we'll have the question answer session, and then you make certain comments over there, and then I will wind it off. So, Dr. Naseem,
sure,
I hand over it to you.
Sure, sir. Sure. Thank you, and good morning to everyone. I am glad to be here to chair this session on educational accessibility and the impact of pandemic. It is a pleasure to be here with Professor Sanjay Singh sir. He's a brilliant intellectual. So we will find out more today. By the way, today we have a really talented panel of speakers who are extremely well knowledgeable on this subject. So I ask all the participants to please fly their difficulties with some suggestions, because time is limited. You will not be able to deliver whole paper. So may good use your time. Thank you, and over to today's moderator. Kindly call the first speakers, please.
Okay. Fine. So before starting the session, I would like to tell the rules of to the participants that each and every participant will be given 5 minutes to deliver his or her presentation. And before giving the presentation, each and every participant, please introduce yourself as well as the topic on which you are going to present. Fine. And the participants can also share their PPT also. Fine. So now we have our first participant. Just a minute. Shreya Yadav. Over to you, Shreya Yadav. Karthikeya?
Yes, sir. I think it's not in the session.
Okay.
Call the next one, na?
Miss Tanvi Purti and Shivam Jindal. Please.
Yes. Good morning, everyone.
Please carry on.
Is my screen visible and am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. So thank you so much for giving me this opportunity and my co-author Shivam, in presenting this paper in front of Sanjay Singh sir and Naseem Ahmed sir. And this is really a great opportunity. So our topic is Right to Education, Assessing a Decade of Reform and Way Forward for India. So as we all know that right to education is not a new phenomena. Even before independence, there was demand by social activists like Dadabhai Naroji, Gopal Krishna Gokhale, Jyotiba Phule regarding, making right to education free for everybody. And ever since, and then post independence, when we got independence, it was a question that whether right to education should be made a fundamental right, or should it be included in the directive principle of state policy. And I would like to quote the meeting of the Constituent Assembly, which was then chaired by Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. And he then decided on this question that, we don't have enough funds with the government to make it enforceable. So it will be better if we put it under Article 45 of the Indian Constitution as the directive principle of state policy, rather than making it a fundamental right. But it was it was envisioned then, and probably there will come a time in India, where we will have a right to education as a free and fundamental right. And then over the years, with the effort of social activists, with the proactive judiciary, with judgments like Uni Krishna judgment by the Apex Court of the Land, and Mohini Singh judgment, the impetus for making right to education as a law, as a fundamental right, it paved the way. And then it was also because of a lot of international pressure from UDHR. So it was incumbent upon India to make education free and compulsory for at least at primary level. So if we look at the 86th Amendment of the Constitution, which inserted the fundamental right, it says that free and compulsory education will depend on the capacity of the state governments of how much they can fund. So if they can fund up to the age of 14 years, perfect for them. If they want to increase it also, so there is a scope in our constitution for that. But until now, all our state governments, the laws that they have enacted, it provides free and compulsory education up to the age of 6 to 14 years. So the Act clarifies that compulsory education means that the government has a legal obligation to ensure children between the ages of 6 and 14 be admitted, attend, and complete primary school. The term free denotes that the child will not be charged any fees that will prevent him or her from completing the education. Now, it's been a decade, like I said. So what exactly has been the benefit? Because we will read a lot of reports, or so much research has been carried out over the last 10 years on the implementation of Right to Education Act. And every research that I have studied, they all have pointed out that the law per se has not been enacted in its spirit, or the implementation has not been properly done on the ground level, at the grassroots level. There are certain limitations regarding the funding, regarding the infrastructure, regarding making schools accessible to children, regarding providing good sanitation facilities, employing teachers in schools, and so on and so forth. So there are various challenges to the Right to Education Act. But here I want to highlight the biggest achievement of Right to Education Act 2009. And that is that this act has increased India's literacy ratio, and it has made the primary and secondary school available in rural and urban areas to a large number of population, which was not available before this act. So the consumption of primary and secondary school, the consumption of education index, which is calculated by the census and the National Family Health Survey. We don't have the census report of 2021 because of the COVID pandemic, but we have the National Family Health Survey, the recent one that the government has released. And according to that, in rural areas, 92.7% of households, and in urban areas, 87.2% of households reported availability of primary school within 1 kilometer of the house. And nearly 68% of rural households and 80% of urban households reported upper primary schools within 1 kilometer from the house, while only about 38% of rural households, compared to around 70% of urban households, reported secondary schools within such a distance. So this is a huge achievement for a country like India, because this was not available 10 years before, when we started on with the Right to Education Act, because Right to Education Act clearly focuses on making schools available to students within 1 kilometer of the ratio and 5 kilometer for senior levels up to the age of 14 years. So what exactly has been the benefit of introducing accessibility, for increasing the accessibility to schools? And that has been to make a person right from the age of 6 years, his basic understanding of reading and writing. That's how we assess our literacy rate. So the basic understanding in their own native language, local language, of reading and writing, basic stuff, that that is accessible to Indians today. And so according to the National Family Health Survey, it points to a literacy rate amongst adult women, which is 71.5%, and adult men, 84.4%. So now I want to highlight that the states which have done better on this, because as I said, that the right to education currently rests with the states on how they want to implement it. And so we have jotted down the states who have performed well and the states who were not able to perform well. And before I come to the state level, I also want to point out that in 2009, when Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, when he was before, when this act was laid down in the parliament, so he gave his own personal experience that when he used to go to school, there was the school was very far off, during his time, and he had to travel a long distance. And it was his vision that, students in India do not have to travel that long just to get their fundamental right to education. So I think that we are making his dream is sort of coming into reality with this. So I just want to point out a couple of literacy rates in the state. In Goa, the female literacy rate has increased from 81% to 93%. Male and female literacy rate in Himachal Pradesh, they have increased by 4% and 15% respectively. Meghalaya has further increased its female literacy rate by 15%, and Manipur has also increased its male literacy rate by 9% and female by 14% respectively. Haryana, which is a state that is so much categorized as which has so much patriarchy, and the gender disparity in its education ratio was huge. After Rajasthan, Haryana was on number 2. It has reduced its gender disparity by 7%. And Sikkim has also improved its literacy rate of both males and females by 6% and 12%. Now I want to highlight the states which have not performed well. So instead of any increment, male and female literacy rates in Tripura, they have decreased by 4% and 3% respectively. And Chandigarh has registered no change in male and female literacy rate. They have actually decreased. And Bihar, there also there has been no change, and the gender disparity continues to be at 20%. So now we want to suggest certain suggestions, and which I would like to invite my co-author to suggest that the suggestions that we can make in the act so that it becomes more effective on the ground and we can ensure quality education for all. So over to you, Shivam.
Thank you, ma'am. I just conclude our presentation with some suggestions to improve the qualitative aspect of the education. States that lack infrastructure are yet to achieve the target of making schools accessible to children in the prescribed area limit must invest more in the better infrastructure. Safe toilets and sanitary napkins should be available in all schools so that girls and their parents feel secure in sending them to schools. Puberty should not be an obstacle for girls to attend schools. Empowering and educating local self-government at the grassroots level. No one connects with the masses as local heads do, and their involvement is critical in spreading awareness about the law in rural India. With power comes accountability. An audit mechanism should be put in place to check the utilization of funds by the local self-government and for the implementation of the act. To introduce a skill-based curriculum in schools based on the regional opportunities available so that a child on completion of school education can use the skills to earn a livelihood. Ma'am, please scroll down the next thing. To employ teachers and
please conclude. Please conclude as soon as possible. Thank you.
Okay, sir. The last two suggestions that I want to give, states who lack funds for increasing the ambit from 14 to 18 years of age can introduce scholarships for certain students, get in touch with non-governmental organizations that are working in this direction, and even merge with corporate social responsibility schemes to provide education till 18 years of age. Pandemic has exposed the digital divide in our education system. Many students have lost access to schools due to a non-availability of gadgets. The government needs to act on board footing to resolve this and cover up this education deficit. Please scroll down to the last screen. As our former Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh once said, our government believes that if we nurture our children and young people with the right education, India's future as a strong and prosperous country is secure. And that is this is the time to make this a reality and secure India's future by empowering each life with the light of education. Thank you.
Thank you so much once again for giving us this opportunity.
Thank you, Tanvi. It was a nice presentation based on the secondary data.
Thank you, sir.
But what I need, in fact, since now pandemic is nearly over and we should be hopeful that the difficulties, in fact, they are over. You people should visit the field also. Because whatever data, macro data that is available, in fact, in the form of different surveys, they do have certain important methods to collect that. But when you corroborate these data, in fact, through your field studies, you take certain important cases, certain important schools in the remote areas, in the urban areas, you may compare that. And through that, you may get a very different, in fact, understanding of the reality. So just wait for some more time. And after that, you can develop this paper, taking recourse to the field studies. And that will be good for you. Thank you. Naseem, if you have anything to say, please. So next.
Thank you, sir.
Next, we have Archie Agarwal and Mudit Zohar. Over to you, Archie and Mudit. Karthikeya, are they available right now?
Yes, sir. They are submitting.
Okay.
Sir, am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Am I visible as well? And
Yes, you are visible. Please go ahead.
I'll share my screen. Just a second. Give me a second. I'm not able to share my screen. Is there any issue? I guess there's some issue with sharing my screen.
Sir, I think the option has to be enabled by the organizers for sharing.
Options is already enabled.
Archie, can you share it if it's possible?
Yeah, Mudit, I can share the screen. Just give me a minute.
Thank you so much. Archie, you are not audible.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I'm sharing.
All right.
Is the screen visible?
Yes, it is.
Just a minute. I think there's some technical issue. I'm not able to share it. There is some technical issue. I'll just rejoin.
Okay. I'll start without the screen and then rejoin and then share it.
That will be good.
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, I would like to thank you for such a great opportunity. It's a very good opportunity for me to present my paper in front of such a panel. So today, I and my co-author will present our research work titled as Displayed Impact of COVID-19, Inequality in Learning Opportunities. All the children have the right to education, as it is stated, a right that many are not able to exercise in the recent years.
Mudit, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but is my screen visible now?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
The pandemic has disrupted children's education, with schools closing particularly in many regions of India, where most people lack access to digital resources. To halt the spread of COVID-19, several governments stopped educational facilities, and according to a study, closure of schools and other facilities impacted 94% of the world's student population. Now we will move to the research methodology of the paper. The research is done by quantitative analysis by taking areas of Delhi and some rural areas of Uttar Pradesh, such as Shamli and Meerut, to determine the educational inequality during the COVID-19 pandemic. Other data is collected from secondary sources like research papers, books, and stuff. Moving on to the basis of the survey, the authors classify the data into the age group that is below 14 to 18, 19 to 22, 23 to 27, and 35 and older. The survey consists of a variety of topics, including does a lack of contact affect learning, and do kids report feeling disconnected from school altogether, and inequality in overall impact of virtual learning on students, such as physical, mental, and social well-being. Again, the survey was conducted in some parts of Delhi and some parts of UP, and this is just a glimpse of the survey we have done. Please refer to the full paper for the whole survey and analysis. Now we will move on to the survey. You can see the screen. Actually, you can switch between Delhi and UP simultaneously. Now, if we see the first question asked, on the scale of 1 to 5, how would you rate your stress level, average stress level? And we see that both the participants in Delhi as well as UP rated an average of 3 to 4 in both the regions, showing that pandemic has affected their mental health and stressed the kids. Again, the internet accessibility in both the regions comes out to be quite same, and but to the shock, average people in Delhi wanted the next semester to be online as well, whereas in Chamli and areas of Meerut, it was clear cut that students wished an online and offline semester next year. The result in both the effectiveness came same, that people are not able to learn effectively and enhance their skill online, causing a lot of issues. Now with this, I would like to call my co-author Archie to continue the further.
Greetings to everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Greetings to everyone present here. I am Archie Agarwal, third year BBA LLB student. So proceeding with the further research of the research paper, I would like to emphasize on various government policies on education. So according to United Nations Sustainable Development Objective, by which they had the objective of ensuring education to all the children by 2023. So to attain this particular objective, an intensive outreach program has to be ensured so that the students can return to school, and impediments to readmissions must be minimal. And government has to ensure back-to-back rescue of the strategies and should prioritize their children. Another data was collected by Human Rights Watch, which was collected in April 2020 and April 2021, where an interview was conducted throughout the nation to check the trends and the patterns of education. So students in their teens, they said that they had to travel kilometers to obtain the email and WhatsApp messages by the professors. And even children, they disclosed the edit of remote learning strategies for pupils while online education and assignments. Teachers have even paid for the equipment, resources, and internet access, and a few instances to guarantee youngsters the education. And another survey was conducted by UNESCO, UNICEF, and World Bank, where they have mentioned that the national survey that they provide additional teachers training via distant education. So various drawbacks that have been gone through by the authors, and after that, grave consequences of the pandemic has induced school gap and learning loss, and they have profoundly influenced the current population. Proceeding to the another research, education inequalities before COVID-19. It is addressed by the authors that the educational inequality was already existing before the pandemic. Also, UN has figured out that roughly 1 in 5 children were out of schools already. Additionally, the knowledge was far from assured even for those attending the schools. Lack of resources and access to high quality education are not a new challenges, but they have just been gained prominence in the wake of pandemic. Another survey was done by UNICEF's Rapid Assessment of Education during school closure. This was another finding by the authors was that this includes a gender inequality in the education, where girls have already experienced numerous types of discriminations when it comes to obtaining an education. They face further prejudice when it comes to continuing their education. There are certain recommendations and drawbacks that the authors would like to address, that opportunities to create new unique techniques to address and resolving the crisis requires the attention of the government. And not only education is a fundamental right, but it is also an enabling right that has a direct bearing on the realization of other human rights. There is a need to strengthen the education system and help government solve immediate challenges and respond to future calamities in education. There is also a requirement to encounter the economic and social disparities, and where the majority of the students have resorted to high level of stress, they have resorted to drug abuse, and they have even shifted to virtual learning if the aftermath of pandemic. So concluding with the presentation, what all we required right now is rescue plans have to be formulated by the government, where priority must be given to the education, and government has to address the pandemic's impact on children's education and pre-existing issues already. And states must also address the deficiency in the schooling that has ensured that pandemic would deepen inequality. And another conclusion, in the view of pandemic, several financial consequences have also been faced by the national economies. And here the government have to prioritize and strengthen the funding for the public education in general, and re-examine the low priority and ongoing underfunding traditionally accorded to delivering the emergency situations. Thank you.
So thank you, Archie and Modit. No doubt, both of you, in fact, have taken recourse to the field data as well as the different studies done by different organizations. But if you take the present scenario, and with that, we're also with us a new education policy. So what are the important, in fact, things that we can incorporate in the new education policy? In fact, that act is there, things are now done. Maybe this pandemic that has created a difficult situation for us, we need to revisit that particular act. We need to inculcate some more important domains and dimensions to that. So that's good. In fact, you have taken an initial step to study that. This is important, but you incorporate at least what policy suggestions, in fact, you can give it to the different policy makers with reference to all this, and particularly with reference to the new education policy. Number of people, in fact, they are talking about, but exactly what input, in fact, we can provide it through our studies, that's also very important. So thank you. Who is our next presenter?
Thank you so much.
And meanwhile, Naseem.
Thank you so much.
Naseem, you are there.
Sir.
What I want, in fact, that if we take one or two questions simultaneously, that will be good. Otherwise, at the last of the session, maybe they forget.
I'm trying for question. So sure.
Getting it. So you, just after the presentation is over, we may invite some questions, one or two, not more than that.
Sure.
So next presenter, who is
So
that?
our next presenter is Devanshi Singh and Dr. Aparna Singh. Over to you, ma'am.
Devanshi.
Kartike, is she there?
Yes, sir, she has joined.
Okay.
A very good morning to everyone. I think I am the next speaker. I've just joined right now. Should I start my presentation, sir?
Yeah, carry on.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. A very good morning to everyone. My name is Devanshi Singh. I'm the research scholar in Dr. Ram Manohar Lohia, National University, Lucknow. And today I'll be presenting the paper titled Demystifying the Meritocracy Argument in Higher Education System, a way forward to reform social justice in the era of globalization. The paper has been prepared by Dr. Aparna Singh and myself. Starting with speaking about access to education. Access to education is very important for economic empowerment and opportunity to enjoy a life of culture, which ultimately enables the development of human personality. As we know, the pandemic situation has exposed inequalities globally. The concept of online education has left many without access to education. And if we compare the system of higher education in contrast to primary or secondary school education, we can consider higher education to be a domain of an elite group. And in access to education in this segment often leads to substantial differences in life chances and other admission criteria. Speaking about the concept of merit, which we understand is the testocratic merit. And the testocratic merit is opposed to the democratic merit. Standard examinations, which we have in our education policy, it often does not reflect the past history and the socio-economic background of a candidate. And this in turn reduces the guarantee of equal opportunity, which is a constitutional mandate. And so in order to have a complete sense of merit, there should be a clear understanding of the socio-economic status, the cultural level of a family, parental education, the nature of upbringing, and the other facilities that are available to a person. And to cater to these needs, the concept of positive discrimination, the affirmative reservation policy, all these things often cater to the needs of the underprivileged and provide access to education to everyone. So in short, I can say if we equate merit, then intelligence, apart from intelligence, effort to intelligence and societal values should have a key role. And to conclude, I would like to quote what Chinnappa Reddy has said in Vasant Kumar versus State of Karnataka. He says that the mere securing of marks at an examination may not necessarily make a good administrator. An efficient administrator must be one who possesses, among other qualities, the capacity to understand with sympathy and therefore to tackle bravely the problems of a large segment of population constituting the weaker section of the people. Thank you.
So thank you, Devanshi. In fact, but you did not take recourse to the different resources available to you. One of the very important book, in fact, The Tyranny of Merit.
Yes, sir.
That's
yes,
by
sir.
Michael Sandel, in fact. And that
Yes,
was
sir.
sent
Sir,
to me by
yes,
one
sir.
of the old students.
Yes, sir.
That's why you take recourse to that. And that's very good, in fact,
Yes, sir.
writing with reference to the paper that you are going to write.
So
So you take other inputs.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Yeah.
sir. Since the time allotted was only 5 minutes, so I've just prepared a very short summary. Otherwise, in the
No
paper,
doubt. No
I've
issues, no
quoted
issues.
Galanter and every other issues in detail I have dealt. But just to have a very short taste of the paper, I've just prepared 2 minutes, 3 minutes speak up on the topic.
Okay, no issues. So Naseem, you do have anything to say?
No, sir.
It's a good.
She's doing well, sir.
Next presenter.
So our next presenter is Rituparna Dey.
She is there or not?
Kartikeya, is she?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. She's there. I request Rituparna ma'am to unmute.
Kartikeya, please contact ma'am. Is she facing any issue right now to join?
Okay,
So
sir.
we can have the next presenter. After that, we'll take Rituparna.
Okay, so next presenter is Nishant Singh Rawat and Sahil Malhotra.
Am I
Yes,
audible?
Yeah.
Okay, good morning. Very good morning, our respected chairpersons, Dr. Professor Sanjoy Singh, and the co-chairpersons, Dr. Nasim Ahmed, sorry, and the other committee member also. Today, my presentation, I am Rituparna De from Kujwar Pancharan Brahma University. Today, my presentation's topic is Impact of COVID-19 Pandemic on Right to Education, a Critical Analysis. Okay, right to education is the most important part for development and empowerment of every nation. Every human being has right to education. In fact, education has its the functionalism in almost all sphere of life, and education signifies can never be marginalized. Nowadays, novel coronavirus is one of the most dangerous virus that exists ever in the world. Education is undeniably crucial in contributing to the country welfare and individual growth, but it has been jeopardized by the emergency of COVID-19. And it has a huge impact on the life of the million of kids. Then COVID-19 has affected a large number of students across the state, class, caste, gender, and the region. The shutting down of the schools and the decisions of the shifting traditional classroom to the digital classroom is not only the increasing the learning inequality among the children, but also the school due to the digital divide. And other than the absence of the schools would also have a long lasting effect on the health and nutrition of the children. Education is the fundamental rights and the fundamental human rights. And human right to education, the United Nations play an important role with regard to the human right educations in the world. And United World Conference of the Human Rights held in Vienna in 1993, the education training and the public informations are the very essential part in the promotions of the human rights. United Nations Decade 1994 was proclaimed the human right education. The General Assembly adopted the United Nations Declarations of the Human Rights Education and Training in December 2011. And the right to education is a very important part in the constitutions and the other legal acts also. Constitutions in the Supreme Court has implied the right to education as a fundamental right from Article 21. 21 say the right to personal life and personal liberty. The word life has been held in the include the educations because the education promote the good and the dignified life. The Constitution's 86th Amendment 2002 introduced Article 21A in the Constitutions in India to provide free and compulsory educations to all children in the age of 6 to 14 years of age. And in this amendment, the Article 51A in the chapter of the fundamental duties by adding clause K to provide the parent and guardian to give the opportunity for the education in his child and age group is 6 to 14 years. Before this amendment, in Mohini Jain cases that is popularly known as the capitation-free cases, the Supreme Court held that right to education is a fundamental right under Article 21 of the Constitution, which cannot deny to a citizen by charging the higher fees, known as the capitation fees. Subsequently, in the Unnikrishnan cases, the Supreme Court asked to examine the correctness of the decisions given by the Court of Mohini Jain cases. 5 judge bench by the 2/3 majority partly agreed in the Mohini Jain cases. But the others...
Will you please conclude, and what you want to say in your paper, you just say that.
Okay. And Mohini Jain cases, and after that, the 21A is a better and effective manner because the right to child to Free and Compulsory Education Act 2009 was enacted, and education, and then the impact of the post-pandemic era. According to the Observer Research Foundations in India, 250 million children were adversely affected due to the schools closure due to the early lockdown imposed by the government in response to the COVID-19. All the world, COVID-19 has disrupted the education sector. COVID-19 has a various positive and the negative impact also. Positive impact is the blended mode learning and the learning management systems also, and improve the use of the electronic media for sharing the information. Improvement in the collaborative work and develop the use of soft copy of the learning materials. Rise in the online meeting, teleconference, and the webinar also. And the negative impacts is the hamper the educational activity, lack of the access of the laboratories or libraries, impact of the educations on the employment also, and loss of the nutrition due to the school closure, because in the rural area there are the students in India who come in school just because of they can get food, and the great midday meal schemes has helped many children who could not bring their food from the home to get their nutrition. Because of the closure of the schools, the students are suffering from not having enough food for their survival. Suggestion: the government and the educational institutions should plan to continue the educational activity, maintaining the social distance, and the every educational institutions maintain the COVID-19 protocol and take proper step for the proper examinations for every classes. And every educational institutions arrange the various effect program relating to the educations for development of the students. Thank you.
Thank you, Rituparna. But what I suggest to you is that you take some field study also. You get some feedback from the field, from the different individuals, different stakeholders, in fact, who are sufferers. And at least through that, you will get a clear idea who is being suffered more in comparison to others also, because it's a comparison. If you perceive the urban frame, more or less, they have all the facilities. So their sufferings, in fact, they are of a very different kind than the sufferings of those who are there in the rural background or in the tribal areas. So you can take recourse to that and you can develop this into a good paper. So next presenter.
Our next presenter is Nishant Singh Rawat and Sahil Malhotra. Over to you, Nishant and Sahil.
Sir, am I audible?
Please.
Yes, sir. Good morning, respected members chairing this session. I'm Sahil Malhotra. I'm a research scholar in Himachal Pradesh National Law University, and I would be sharing my views on the topic role of courts, Indian courts, in shaping the future of children in the field of education. So, as we all know that the main task of the court is to uphold torch of justice, and in order to do so, education plays an important role. It is because of education that a person transforms himself into a pattern of perfection through systematic process of development of the body, enrichment of the mind, sublimation of the emotions, and the illumination of the spirit. So with these words, I would be highlighting the role of courts, as I've already mentioned that the prime duty of the court is to uphold justice, and in what context, and in context of education as to what they are doing, it is sanam bonum, and it is very imperative for us to understand. So as Jeremy Bentham suggested, that law which does not serve the society is mere waste of paper, liable to be thrown in bin. So the ultimate purpose of the law is to serve the society. And by serving the society, education also plays an important role. The role of education in India has started way back from Kothari Commission and then which was entrusted with advising the government on the evolution of national system of education, on the basis of which National Policy on Education 1968 was formulated. So this was the initial phase where national education policy was brought in India, and later on it was drafted. As has already been held by the earlier speaker, that in case of Mohini Jain, it was held by the Honorable Apex Court that right to education is part of fundamental right enshrined under Article 21A of the Constitution, under Article 21 as well 21. Since 21A was not there in the picture when Mohini Jain's case was there, it was only after the 86th constitutional amendment in the year 2002 that right to education came into existence as a fundamental right. Furthermore, it is also imperative to mention that in case of Unni Krishnan versus State of Andhra Pradesh, in this case, the Honorable Supreme Court had to adjudicate upon the Ekin proposition of law as discussed in Mohini Jain's case, as to whether private institutions could lawfully charge capitation fee. The Honorable Supreme Court held that the right enshrined under Article 21, if read in consonance with Article 41, then the court was of the view that the parameters of right to life and liberty must be comprehended in such a way that the directive principles of the state policy, as enshrined in 45, which states that the state is duty bound to give education which is free and compulsory to all children under the age of 14, is to be understood in the context that right to education is sine qua non, and its effective implementation is to be carried out throughout the country. Later on in TMI Pai Foundation's case, it was held that the constitutional validity of Karnataka education institution was challenged, and the opening part of the judgment mentions about the lack of quality of education and adequate number of schools and colleges that provide educational institutions. The main highlight of this judgment was that it was overruled in Unni Krishnan's case, and further observed that all citizens have the fundamental right to establish and administer educational institutions under Article 19(1) AG, and the term occupation, which is there in Article 19(1) G, comprehends the establishment and running of educational institutions, and state regulation of admissions in such institutions would be regarded as unreasonable restriction on that fundamental right to carry on business under Article 19 Clause 6 of the Constitution.
What you want to conclude, what you want to say in your paper, you just come on that particular aspect.
Right, sir. My conclusion would be that indisputably, growth of a person is based upon education, which is inculcated, and sans any shadow of doubt, education is synonymous for civilized society. Although not initially, but in the recent past, education has gained significant importance in shaping a man and his future prospects. Education in the extant status has elevated to a level where no civilization can survive without it. Increasingly, the level of education is rising up, and due to automation and machine learning, role of education has become even more imperative. Even the teachers, professors, educators are demanded to have exceptional, impeccable knowledge, as held in case of Ram Sharan Maurya versus State of UP. With the changing time, and especially with introduction of artificial intelligence, human beings have achieved a lot in terms of technological sphere. Howbeit, the fact remains that education surmounts, and that is why it has been created by humans' mind intellect, and the same stems from education. Generation of the present time must realize that it is only because of education that human civilization has come so far, and had education not been given due weightage, all civilizations would have not come so far and would have been at the verge of collapse. Honorable courts across the globe have realized the importance of education And it's imperative for all of us to come to terms with the fact that education is the key to open the world for Homo sapiens. The progression that has initiated by the government in the form of National Policy of Education and changed time to time according to the needs of the society have been equally supported and moreover guided by the Supreme Court and High Court. The courts have always paved a way.
Please conclude, Nishant. Please conclude.
Yes, sir. Highlighting the importance of education, which has been there, the courts have played a significant role and would continue and are continuing in doing so. Especially, we have seen from past 2 years how the ways and means of methods of education system has changed, and the courts have time and again highlighted the importance of education, which is very much there important for growth of human civilization. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Nishant and Sahil. You have.
Can I ask a question to Nishant?
You make your comment and you may ask the things.
Nishant, you focused on more education. My question is, what is education?
Yes, sir. Sir, as has been defined, education, as has been defined by the Honorable Supreme Court, in the case, sir, it means that evolution of a person is based upon education which one inculcates. So it is the transformation of a mind, of the body, sublimation of the emotions, and illumination of the spirit.
It is only education.
It's all very subjective. It's very difficult, in fact, for the court to comment on the nature of education and all that. No doubt, the contribution of the courts, in fact, is all very important. But still, you cannot say that it's a court-dictated education system that will work. No, it's not at all. Anyway, next presenter.
Okay, our next presenter is Ankita Shukla. Over to you, Ankita.
Yes, sir. Ankita ma'am is in the meeting.
Am I audible and visible?
Please.
Very good morning to one and all. I am Dr. Ankita Shukla, Assistant Professor, Amity Institute of Advanced Legal Studies, Amity University, Noida, Uttar Pradesh. And before I begin, I would like to place on record my sincerest gratitude to RMNLU seminar committee members, respected chairman and co-chair, for giving me this opportunity to discuss and share my views on the topic emerging issues in law and justice in the perspective of globalization. My topic of discussion is a right to education issues and challenges in the times of COVID-19 pandemic. Now, I'll be very brief. I'll just discuss about certain issues and certain challenges with respect to what we have witnessed during this COVID-19. So we all know about the importance of education. Education, we all say, and we all perceive it as one of the most important and potent weapon in the hands of one to change their life and to build and instill a lot of confidence. Now, that being said, we all know that during the COVID-19 pandemic, before 2 years, like that's in year 2020, the education system, along with the health sectors and various other sectors, had also witnessed a lot of jolt because of how all of a sudden schools were shut, colleges were shut on the orders of the government, and how immediately, all of a sudden, the conventional classroom teaching was made to shift to a virtual e-learning remote form of teaching learning process. Now, this was one form of a change, or we can say a sort of a transformation that we saw during the years of the pandemic, which was, of course, a new thing for everyone. Now, that is when we can see that internet and smartphone availability, affordability, most importantly, is said to be primarily to be a boon for only the privileged ones. And this being said, we actually lose sight of the fact that the real India, we say, lies in the village. And there are around 14 billion children who have, forget about the affordability, internet and other accessibilities during COVID-19. These children, they do not even have the basic right to education. When we talk about this right being elevated as a fundamental right, and government has been doing enough, and they have done enough right from since 2009 when it was declared as a part of fundamental right. There still remains a large chunk of children who do not have the very basic right of education, where we have children who were only going to school just to take the benefit of midday meals. All of a sudden, shutting down of schools had deprived them of that privilege as well. So when we are talking about affordability, when we are talking about classroom teaching being replaced with virtual teaching, which certainly was a novel and a very innovative step, but we should also be mindful of the children. When we talk about children, we have to cut across the barriers with respect to technology, the barriers which is there with respect to age, and most importantly, the social strata or the status that they enjoy. Right to education, which says that 6 to 14, every child should be able to take or should be able to enjoy the privilege, to enjoy the fundamental right of at least going to school, at least knowing how to read and write, their basic essentials that are there, so that they are able to make a life of their own. But when we are talking about technologies, when we are talking about a basic essential requirement nowadays is a smartphone that everyone is now, that is something which is an indispensable part for our children. That is something which is not that every family can afford. Where there are more than one children and a family just can afford, let's say, just one mobile, and every child has to learn from that one, taking the benefit of just one mobile phone. We have to think about these ways also. And that is something which we can say, especially in the times of COVID-19, that consequences, that repercussion has been very evident. That gap of the have and have nots that we have in our country and around the world, probably, that was very much evident. That was out of the blankets, one can say, especially in the time of COVID-19. And just to end, I would say that though, yes, government has been doing, I was listening to my fellow presenters, they presented on a lot of government initiatives and national action plans that have been taken with respect to how online teaching and certain technological changes and advancements that have been suggested and that have been presented by the Government of India in order to make sure that right to education primarily does not suffer. That even though the schools, the colleges, all of them are shut, the education in itself is not to be seen or to be treated as a backseat kind of a stuff. We have to make sure that children, no matter where they are, no matter who they are, or from kind of a family they come in, they are given this very basic education. They are blessed with this potent weapon, a tool in their hands to mark a sort of a transformation for themselves. With that, I rest my case. Thank you so much, the members, for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Ankita.
Yes, sir.
No doubt, you have presented the things taking the course to a very sensitive approach towards the problem. But the question is, in a very normal society also, a differential is there. Those who do not have the resources, they are not at all there in a position to access the facilities, and education is one of them.
Yes.
So in the COVID time period, no doubt, whatever progress we have made through the different programs of the government and otherwise also, now we are compromising with it also. So what should be the next strategy? That's the important, in fact, motive for the researchers to study, that whatever we have lost in last 2 years, how to compensate for that, and what strategies, in fact, we can have so that at least whatever deprivation was there on the part of the people who do not have the resources, how to take up that particular issue. This is important. So we should, in fact, take recourse to the different small studies. I'm not talking about the big studies. And through that small insights, at least we should be there in a position at least to get the things, how to compensate that loss. That's important, in fact, at present. Thank you. Next presenter. Yeah, Naseem,
can
please.
I ask question? Ankita ma'am.
Please.
My question is, any suggestion for better education of right to education in urban areas, especially in rural areas? Sorry.
Yes, sir. Sir, I think with respect to when we talk about elevation of poverty, when we talk about updating the infrastructure, when we talk about providing best of the facilities to teachers, irrespective of the urban and rural, I am not per se differentiating between the rural and urban. All I'm talking about is when we talk about education, it is beyond discrimination. It is beyond brackets of who we are disseminating such information. So if I am onto you can say improving on the level of education, improving on the quality of teachers, how we are recruiting them, and the kind of infrastructure that the private students, the private school students have, and the government school students have, if we are able to work upon that, and most importantly, if let's say the technologies and certain other advancements that urban students are able to enjoy, if somehow we are also able to transform that and we can courier it or we can bring it from that part to the rural paths, maybe somehow we'll be able to bridge that gap, and the level of education will somehow be on an equal footing with respect to and beyond wherever it is, whether it's in the interior part of India or it is on the mainstream. We would be able to see that, yes, similar form of education, similar form of delivery system, the teaching pedagogy would somehow be same. And that is the only thing. If I'm talking about technologies and internet facilities, affordability and all, then yes, along with certain government initiatives and plans that we already have, we also have to work on infrastructure, and most importantly, implementation of National Education Policy 2020. If that is, let's say, if we are working on it, and as to how that strictly has to be implemented, maybe we can see a change, or certainly we will see a change in years to come. Thank you, Naseem, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, so our next presenter is Amalnika Bora and Amit Anand. Over to you, Amalnika and Amit.
Hello.
Yes, you are audible now.
Yeah, okay. All right. Thank you. Good morning to everyone. The title of our paper is Access to Internet is a Part of Right to Education and Analysis. And this paper has been written by, it has been co-authored by Amlanika Bora, who is an assistant professor at School of Legal Studies, Reva University, Bangalore, and myself. I'm currently pursuing my PhD in law from Lancaster University, UK. So like I said, our paper is Access to Internet, and it's a part of Right to Education and Analysis. So the access to Internet, we all know, is essential for the realization of right to life and its various derivative rights, including right to education. Now, our paper aims at analyzing the right to Internet as part of right to education guaranteed under the Constitution of India in light of its various judicial pronouncements. Our paper also provides the basis for right to Internet, keeping in mind the International Human Rights Framework. Now, it cannot be overemphasized that the principles of universality and inalienability of human rights, such as the right to life, food, education, health, shelter, they form the cornerstone of the international human rights regime. Moreover, these human rights are indivisible and interdependent, which also highlights the interlinkages among these rights, by which I mean that the violation of some of these rights can negatively affect the enjoyment of other rights as well. Again, these rights are essential for the fulfillment of our basic needs, so that we can all lead a decent life. Now, according to James Nichol, he understands human rights as not ideals of the good life for humans, but to him they are concerned with ensuring the conditions, both negative and positive, of a minimally good life. John Tassiolis says that the determination of which human right is essential for the fulfillment of our basic needs, it depends on practical reasoning that needs to be backed up often by empirical inquiry. So our paper, keeping in mind the sort of the definitions and the understanding given by these two scholars, also broadly argues that the right to internet access, including internet access as part of right to education, is an example of practical reasoning, especially in today's sort of digital environment, since the internet not only acts as a platform for providing inclusive education globally, but most importantly is increasingly becoming a vital medium for exercising the right to freedom of expression and to hold opinions. Now, the basis for this sort of understanding, or the basis for our paper, it follows through from a not so sort of recent United Nations Human Rights Council resolution, which was passed, I think, in July 2016, which was titled "The Promotion, Protection, and Enjoyment of Human Rights on the Internet." And this resolution has sort of provided the justification for the promotion and protection of internet access, recognizing its increasing importance in the digital age. Also, prior to the resolution coming into effect, internet access has been recognized, at least to an extent, under international law through the Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, 1948, and the International Covenant on the Civil and Political Rights, 1966. Now, especially Article 19 of the ICCPR, if you look at that, specifically Clause 2 of Article 19, it recognizes that individuals are active participants and not just passive recipients of information, because as active participants, individuals sort of seek, receive, and impart information and ideas. These are the phrases used under Article 19 of Clause 2, that as individuals, we just not receive information, but we also engage with that information. We sort of divulge that information to some other party, and we sort of engage with the entire process. So we are not just passive recipients, but we are active participants. And keeping that in mind, we sort of need this access to the internet and for using it for various purposes. Again, if you look at Article 10 of the European Convention for the Protection of Human Rights and Fundamental Freedoms, ECHR 1950, it's similarly worded to Article 19 of the ICCPR. Also, the other point that our paper also makes is that considering the usage, the global usage of internet all throughout, the importance of internet access is also essential for the realization of other human rights. It's a point that I made early on. Consequently, an argument, therefore, is also advanced that the right to internet access is a sui generis right. It's a class in itself, as it is not restricted by or incorporated with any other right. So internet access is a separate right altogether, as it is not a version of any other right, such as freedom of speech or the right to peaceful assembly. However, it does sort of enable the access to such rights in the digital space or the digital platform. So if you talk about the right to freedom of speech, internet sort of provides you with a platform to exercise this particular right. So it sort of enables you to exercise this right in a sort of a better manner. But in itself, it's a sort of a right in itself, and that needs to be recognized. In short, internet access plays a fundamental role in the full realization of certain rights in the global context. The sui generis nature of internet access is also sort of explained by how much transformation has been brought by the internet in the way individuals communicate, interact, and sort of acquire information. And this transformative change has also led to new understanding of basic human rights, such as free speech and free assembly. Also, the other point that the paper also sort of highlights is that internet access.
Please conclude. Conclude.
Yes. Just one more. Internet access acts as a crucial medium for exercising basic political rights, and those who do not have access to such rights are placed at a disadvantageous position. Now, coming to the Indian sort of scenario, there is a very recent case of the High Court of Kerala, which takes into consideration all these international conventions. So this is the case of Fahima Shireen versus State of Kerala. it came in 2019, which sort of takes into consideration all the international conventions and says that when the Human Rights Council of the UN has found that right to access to internet is a fundamental freedom and a tool to ensure right to education, a rule or instruction which impairs the said right of the students cannot be permitted to stand in the eye. So essentially saying that Article 21 of the Constitution could then be expanded to also include right to access to internet for the purposes of education. So yeah, so this is the final point that our paper makes, keeping in mind the international sort of perspective on internet, its usage, and how under the Indian scenario, through the various pronouncements of the Supreme Court and the High Court decision, how the access to internet can be related to education as well. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. In fact, when we are going for the digital world, no doubt, there's a very important component, and maybe in a time to come, that will be, in fact, a need of the hour. And when you just argue for right to internet, I do not know why we people argue more and more regarding all these things. In fact, government, when you take recourse to the Indian frame, the government is already, in fact, uttering that yes, it's the need of the hour, and in time to come, we are going to provide each and every individual free access to information. And number of efforts, in fact, that's also there from the side of the government. I'm talking from the perspective of India. So when you take Europe and America, maybe the things are easily available to those who are resourceful. Since we are there in the process, may be in a time to come, we are going to provide it to all. But well, before that, there are certain important fundamental issues. Right to food, right to school. What about these? Unless and until these basics, they are not at all there, I do not know why we are arguing for number of other important things. In fact, it's very difficult. And if that's accessible to us, maybe phone is there with me, but the school is not there, accessible to me, how the things will work. So it's all very relative. And that's why we'll have to be very careful, in fact, what very important issues, in fact, we are arguing for, and till what extent, in fact, that argument, in fact, they should go. So thank you. Who is our next presenter? If any question is there, anyone may ask. If not, who is the next presenter, please?
So our next presenter is Ashish Pathak and Riya Shukla.
Please, Ashish and Riya.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. A very good morning, Chairperson, sir, Co-Chair, sir, and my dear friends. First of all, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to RMNLU Lucknow and the entire team for rendering me this opportunity to present my research on the topic Right to Education, Contemporary Issues and Challenges. Myself, I am Ashish Pathak, and I am pursuing LLM from Babasaheb Bhimrao Ambedkar University, Lucknow. So I would like to start with the quotation, education is the most powerful weapon that you can use to change the world. That is said by the Nelson Mandela. So what is education? So education with a holistic outlook is dealt with the development of every person's intellectual, emotional, social, physical, artistic, creative capacities. It looks to indulge a student in the teaching and learning processes and encourages the personal and the collective responsibility. Education is that basic human right and the best investment that we can make to ensure a sustainable future and leave no one behind. And that is true for every country and every religion. However, millions are deprived of educational opportunity every day, and many of the result of social, cultural, and economic factors. A recent report on the latest National Statistical Organization survey show how austere are the digital divide across the states, cities, and the villages, and even in the income groups. The study on household social consumption related to education was a part of NSO 75th round conducted from the July 2017 to July 2018. Most of the internet-enabled homes are located in the metropolitan cities where 42% have the internet access. In India, however, only 15% are connected to the internet. The Right to Education Act, that is supposed to be unduly input focused rather than the outcome oriented. However, the India's new education policy has filled the fissure, which will indeed enhance the quality as a methodology in the education system. More Right to Education, along with the other governmental initiative, has clearly succeeded in attracting the children to schools, but providing education is a aloof vision. Under the RTI Act, the continuous and the comprehensive evolution is the evolution of mechanism for elementary education. It means an evolution of different kind. For example, pencil paper test, drawing and reading pictures, and the expressing orally, which is different from the traditional system of the examination. Moreover, the right to education is a fundamental right, and the UNESCO proposed education to all by 2015. And India, along with the other countries of the world, should put genuine and the honest approach and effort to make this goal a real achievement. The contemporary issues and challenges now I'm going to discuss. As we know, India is known for the home to 19% of the world's citizens. What does that mean? India is a country where the majority of youngsters live. But it is also true that 1/3 of the world illiterate population reside in India. That it is not like the rate of literacy that has been increased. It is, but the rate of growth is rapidly very slow in contrast to decline. From 1991 to 2001, the rate was 12.6%, while it has declined to 9.21%. To tackle these alarming issues, the government of India introduced the Right to Free and Compulsory Education Act and made the education as a fundamental right for education's age group for the education of the children's age group 6 to 14. The Right to Education is an act of Parliament proposed on 4th of August 2019, which shows and highlight the model of importance of free and compulsory education to the children of age 6 to 14. And I think right to education should imply that every child has to be a provided full-time education of satisfactorily and equitable equality in a formal school that satisfy at least certain essential norms and enable the incomplete elementary education. There are the rights that is related to education as a multidisciplinary right, the right to education and the civil and political right, the right to education and economic rights, the right to education and the cultural rights, and even the right to education and the sustainable development. And even the pace of program on the right to education practically need an upgradation so that individuals know their rights, that they are empowered to claim them. Local authorities must monitor and implement the right to education and report regularly on the deprivation and violation. Indeed, they must advocate and campaign the full-time implementation of right to education, holding the state accountable. Proper management should those for who seek remedy when there are violation of right to the education. And we know that how there is a stark digital divide across the state, cities and villages and income groups. The right to scope of education should not be limited to the 14 years. It should be extended to the secondary level.
Ashish, please conclude and give
Yes,
your
sir.
suggestion, please.
So I'm going to conclude my presentation. The right to free and compulsory primary education is considered as a minimum core obligation of right to education. Effectively, primary education is prioritized given in the importance to the individual. So the right to education include not only the right to access education, but the right to quality education, as quality is a heart of education. Teachers at levels of education are primary means through which the curriculum is delivered and one of the key ways in which aims of education are imparted. So thank you so much, sir.
So thank you, Ashish. You have taken the course to the right to education and the different parameters and the difficulties associated with that.
Yes, sir.
So if anybody have any question, no. Next presenter.
So our next presenter is Dr. Mithali Tiwari.
Mithali, please.
Good morning to the chair and the co-chair and all the respective participants present over here. The topic of my paper is technology necessitated education and the problem of learning poverty. I would like to start my presentation from a concept given by Nobel laureate Professor Amartya Sen, that poverty is not just the deprivation of means of survival, such as food, clothing, and shelter, but it is also the deprivation of opportunities to enhance the capabilities of poor in the form of access to good health and education, and in order to enhance one person's his own living. So in this regard, the objective of my paper is to understand the concept of learning poverty, which has been given by World Bank, and to analyze its impact on the educational efforts of all the nations across the world. I will also analyze the role of in this regard, I will be also analyzing the role of digital repositories, because they have now become important because of the pandemic situation in the countries. And then I will also talk about the skewed nature of accessibility of the facilities like digital platforms, etc. So we have seen that in the COVID-19 scenario, the nations across the world were forced to switch to the online mode of education. And we are not sure how long the students will have to go through this online education, and when the students will be actually able to face the regular physical classes without any disruptions. So also the long-term effects of online classes have yet to be ascertained. The more pressing problem here is regarding the problem of learning poverty. This concept was given by World Bank along with the UNESCO Institute for Statistics. The learning poverty means being unable to read and understand a simple written text by the age of 10. So we have been seeing that we have been increasing our enrollment ratios in the primary education, and we have been saying that we have around 100% enrollment in the primary education. But the problem is how many of the children who are there at the primary level, they are able to read and understand the concepts or the things that are given to them. Now, this learning poverty is an index. The index have been developed by taking into account the schooling and learning indicators. That is, it takes into account the learning deficient children who are there at primary level, plus it is adjusted through out of school children who don't know how to read and write at all. So the data given by World Bank is that 53% of children in low income countries, they are not able to understand a simple story by the end of the primary school. And this percentage has increased to 63% after the pandemic situation has happened. And it is said that the foundational skills are crucial for the educational development, because the child is not able to identify words and grasp subject concepts, although he may be growing up and moving to the higher standards also. Now, the nations across the world have committed to achieving the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which are related to poverty and literacy. But in according to the current scenario, which is there, only 43% of people will be able will still be learning poor by the end of 2030. So World Bank has come up with a lot of educational packages to improve the scenario. And in this regard, the availability and accessibility of educational facilities, such as good and decent libraries, librarians, digital repositories of knowledge, and other digital educational programs are important. Now, in my paper, I have taken into account several experimental studies which have been conducted. Particularly, they are conducted by JPAL, that is the Poverty Action Lab. You must have heard about this Poverty Action Lab because Nobel laureate Professor Abhijit Banerjee had also taken into account the experimental studies which have been conducted in these labs. So I would like to point out few of the experimental studies which show the nature of learning poor, which is there. And I will here point out one study which was conducted with JPAL along with the Akshara Foundation, Bangalore. And the study was conducted in the experimental setting, wherein the two groups were taken, two groups of students were taken, and they were given access to the digital repositories such as digital libraries, books, etc. And the effect on their learning abilities was seen. And surprisingly, in the end, no effect on learning abilities was seen, even if they were given the access to these repositories. But the problem was that how frequently they are accessing to these repositories. So it was found that the frequency with which the children use these repositories of knowledge is important in developing the language skills of the children, and the vocabulary of the children. In this regard, there were several other studies which show that the availability of decent libraries is important for children to collect and analyze the research information which is there. They also have, if the lack of decent libraries is also creates an impact on the struggle with which the with the literary skills of the children and gathering information from the professionals. Also, studies have shown that availability of good school librarians is also important, and it has a positive correlation with the student standardized reading scores of poor children. Also, good librarians, they help in finding books through
Mithali, conclude, huh? You conclude what you want to say. In fact,
sir, actually, I want to say in the end that there is dichotomy of poverty. There is income poverty on the one hand and learning poverty on the other hand. And as Professor Amartya Sen had said, that it is important to enhance the capabilities of people so that they may earn their own living. But since they are having income poor also and there is learning poverty also, this vicious circle continues. But the problem with us is that we are focusing more on increasing the quantity of education, like we are increasing the enrollment ratio. We are Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan and all have increased the enrollment ratio in primary education, no doubt, but we are not paying attention to the quality of education which is there, plus the skewed nature of the educational opportunities, like technology, availability of technology, and like the other researchers have told that the necessity of having internet, laptops, books, etc. So the focus now should move from only the increasing the quantity of education, increasing the literacy rate, but also the quality of education. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mithali. You have taken a very different dimension, in fact, with reference to what you call it as learning poverty. And from there onwards, in fact, that quantitative and qualitative divide that you are all talking about, this is important. But the question is how we should get the things done. That's very important. And no doubt, number of studies, number of individuals, in fact, they have taken the course too. But these particular studies do provide that, yes, differences are there. But the question is how to tackle these differences. Where from the resources will be generated. For example, just these 2 last years, in fact, whatever progress we have made, I just take Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan for example. What you get, that enrollment that we have enhanced through that particular drive. Now, the moment these 2 years, in fact, those enrollments, in fact, they are drastically down. Not only that, what's very difficult to perceive is that the problem is very much there in those particular domains which are already deprived. So a multi-deprivation frame is there with reference to certain population group. So how to take up that, this is important, because if you take the urbanites, if you take those who are well off there in the rural India, for them there is no issue. But when you take recourse to the tribal population group and other vulnerable sections of the society, there are in fact multiple deprivations. and how to tackle these multiple deprivations, that's very important. So thank you. If anyone do have any question to her, you may please ask. So no, good. Next presenter.
Next presenter is Isha Yadav.
Isha, please.
Thank you, sir. Good morning to the chairperson, the co-chair, and to all the participants here. I will be presenting my paper on globalization, cultural relativism, and the expression of mental distress. And in the next few minutes, I will be critically evaluating the impact which globalization is having on our understanding of mental health and ill health. Now, we do know that because of the process of globalization, the traditional boundaries of culture have evolved over a period of time. In fact, if I can say that, it has led to a mergering in national and cultural boundaries. And with this, our understanding of mental health and ill health has also evolved. Harvey in the 1980s conceptualized globalization principally as a compression of time and space, which encompasses everything within its ambit, everything also including mental health. So 3 decades almost, in fact, over 3 decades after this idea was floated, one can only speculate about the impact that this compression has had on individual psyche and the social functioning of individuals. There is, as of today, consensus that there is definitely an impact. The nature and the extent of this impact is yet to be determined. So globalization has majorly influenced the idioms associated with mental distress across cultures, across nations globally. More importantly, it appears to be propelling this universalistic idea to its extreme. Our universalistic understanding of mental illness, that there is some kind of underlying commonality in the psychological responses of people. And like I said, that globalization as an ideology is focusing only on the commonality of psychological responses given out by people. Cultural relativism, on the other hand, is a starkly different idea. It's diametrically opposite. In its absolute form, it stresses on the culture-specific expression of psychological health and illness. Now, mental illness undoubtedly is becoming a global concern. In fact, it has been a global concern for a fairly long amount of time. It is increasingly constituting an enormous burden of disease across nations. Just to quote a few examples, depression is one of the leading causes of disability globally. Suicide happens to be the second most important leading cause of death in adolescents and young adults, second only to accidents and unintentional injuries. Not just that, mental health also spills over to physical health and physical illness of individuals. So people suffering from severe mental health conditions tend to die prematurely, as much as 2 decades earlier as compared to the remaining population, the remaining normal population, if I can term it like that. And these deaths due to physical conditions are typically physical. They typically involve physical conditions which are completely preventable physical conditions. Also, in economic terms, lost productivity as a result of the 2 most common mental disorders, including anxiety and depression, for example, costs the global economy over $1 trillion every year. As was quoted by the World Health Organization and the Lancet report in 2020. And this idea of mental health sort of being a chronic global pandemic has also gained a lot of recognition because predominantly because of globalization within the context of global institutions as well. For instance, the recognition, the explicit recognition of mental health by the UN Sustainable Development Goals is testimony to the fact that mental health is now being recognized, has been, in fact, in the past couple of decades, and like I said, predominantly being propelled by globalization, has gained global recognition. So what is the impact of globalization on our understanding of mental health and the way we look at mental health, the way we understand and evaluate it, and what are the treatments in terms of prevention, the treatments that we have in place to manage these mental health conditions? There clearly is an upside. So globalization, for instance, has facilitated an easy exchange of clinical experience and knowledge among the global psychological community. Not just that, not just in terms of understanding mental illness, but also in terms of fostering dialogue and exchanges related to treatment. So in terms of medication, in terms of the nature and the form of psychotherapy that can be offered to individuals experiencing mental health conditions, mental distress. So for instance, me sitting here in India can easily understand what's going on within the Western circles of psychology, what are the major approaches to treatment that they are taking, and I can implement it within the Indian culture as well. So that is a clear upside to globalization. Also, another upside is getting in a lot of funds and active intervention, specifically from the perspective of developing nations. That has a lot of advantages. Just to quote another example, the World Health Organization recently launched, a couple of years back, launched this special initiative for mental health with the aim of ensuring access to quality and affordable mental health care to 12 priority nations, basically targeted at people who do not have much access to quality mental health care. And roughly over 100 million people are expected to benefit from it, not only just from the perspective of access to quality mental health care, but also from the perspective of increased awareness about mental health, dispelling the stigma around mental health, and of course, implementing new treatments within these communities which do not have adequate access to mental health. So there is a clear upside, and there are other advantages also, but these couple of advantages have been extremely visible at the global front. But along with that, and in fact specifically associated with these dominant advantages, there is also a massive downside to it. Now, and this downside has very aptly been, for instance, summarized by the critique offered by cultural relativists who caution against globalization, turning people and their spaces into homogeneous entities. Now, it's important to acknowledge that the nature and the manifestation of mental health and mental distress is determined by a complex interplay of the subjective and the objective. And the globalization as an ideology is predominantly focusing only on the objective. It's focusing only on these universalistic principles and ideas. And it's almost completely ignoring the subjective nature of it. Categories of mental illness are only to be understood within the social and the cultural context in which they are found and located. And an attempt to understand mental disorders independent of its context would largely be a futile exercise. So predominantly what I'm saying is that perhaps what we need to do is, and that's also the attempt in a lot of psychological circles, is to find a midway between universalism and complete relativism. Simply put, appreciate the diversity in the context of homogeneity, which is becoming extremely problematic, specifically in light of the fact that there is, with globalization, there is extreme capitalization of mental health care, which is also taking place.
Isha, please conclude, ma'am, please.
Yes, sir. So in a nutshell, what the argument is that large corporates and pharmaceutical companies, which are owning research on mental treatment, and are also directing, quite literally directing, the course of mental treatment which is being offered. There is the importance of facilitating indigenous research and clinical practice needs to be stressed. And therefore, for instance, while I, sitting in India, can understand the Western approaches to psychology and psychological treatment and psychotherapy, perhaps it is important that Indian approaches or Indic approaches, and this is not just India, but specific to all developing nations, for instance, their unique expression of mental illness also needs to be appreciated and be adopted within the Western cultures as well. So the question that, for instance, I need to ask today is, why is it that despite psychology being practiced in India for so long, in fact, traditional Indian philosophy is quite grounded in psychology. So despite psychology being so Indian in its origin, yet why is it that I still continue to be extremely influenced by Western psychology, and predominantly it is because of the capitalization of mental health care. So what we need to take is a culture-based bottom-up approach to understand mental disorders and their expression and manifestation, rather than taking a top-down approach to its understanding and also to its treatment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Isha. So you have taken the course to the psychological frame in the context of globalization, and then you are also talking about the cultural relativist perspective. So combining global and local together. Not only that, when you perceive globalization with reference to the present day mental frame, the number of catchwords, in fact, they are there in our dictionaries. And people all around, in fact, they are talking about, without taking recourse to whether these are peculiar to certain important societies, or more or less, they are the part and parcel of all the systems, in fact. For example, number of good studies, if you take recourse to, but they say that whether certain important parameters of depression, parameters of other important psychological disorders, in fact, they are very much prevalent in certain important society, certain important social background. But when you take recourse to the simple society, tribal societies, or the societies, in fact, that you refer it to as a primitive, no doubt they are not primitive, but you say so. Such type of, in fact, issues and problems, they are not at all there. And that's why when we talk about these particular issues with reference to globalization, they are bringing it to us, but whether they are our own issues, our own problems or not, this is important to see. So thank you, Isha, for bringing this particular important fact to us. I think one more presentation is there.
Yes,
and,
our last presenter is Dr. Samreen Hussain.
So after taking the presentation by Samreen, I'll request, in fact, co-chair to summarize at least what happened there in the whole session. So please, Samreen, Dr. Samreen Hussain, please continue with your presentation.
Good afternoon, sir, and my dear participants. I am Dr. Samreen Hussain, and my topic is globalization and its impact on Dalit women. So for the almost 2 hours, I have been listening to beautiful presentations by everyone talking about the effect of pandemic on the education system, on students, on in general, how it has affected our understandings, how we have to change, where we are lacking. I am not thinking about pandemic right now. Because when I took this topic, when I started researching upon this topic with regard to Dalit women, or basically Dalit girls, then what I realized was that for them, pandemic has actually made no difference. The reason being, when everyone is talking about Right to Education Act, and we are discussing that right to education is a fundamental right from the age group of 6 to 14, what it actually, when you say that what this right translates into is that from the age of 6 to 14, every child have a right to have the basic primary education. And then we come to the realities, the harsh realities of the Indian rural areas, that how true this is. And I would like to explain this very small example actually, and taking this example from my own life actually. So basically, I belong to Allahabad, now Prayagraj. That too not exactly Allahabad, from a small village in Phulpur, where my paternal, my father and grandfather has lived. There's a small village called Narai. So I have been going to this village for last 35 years of my life, from the day I was born. So I've been going there, and I have seen the village, the area village. Whenever I enter it and I move around the road, there are small houses, and then when I reach to our own big house, the zamindar house, and then I see people there, and I always ask that there's a very highly populated small area with the women, children, and men living. And I used to say that I used to ask what that area is, and I was said that no, wahan se hum, we don't talk to those people. That area is called Pasiana, and there live the Pasis. So I never knew that what exactly that means. To my young mind, I didn't care. I was more interested in having been there for only 4-5 days to just enjoy the village life, the rustic life with my cousins and everything else. As I grew up, I tried to understand what Pasiana or the word Pasi means. So Pasi is basically more word for Chamar. So this was the Chamar community, which was living hardly, I think, 500 meters from our house. And they were not allowed to enter to our where we were living. They never used to go there. They had this outside the house there was a place where they used to go where when my aunts, my uncles used to give them food and things and all that. Being a very nice people, they supposedly used to provide them with food, clothing, and all those things. So that was the first time when I at the age of, I think, almost 20, I realized the caste distinction, the caste discrimination. And then as recent in 2017, when I started I started having some contact with an organization called PARI. This is a People's Archive for rural India. And this organization is working in 3 states predominantly. It's UP, Karnataka, and Maharashtra. So in UP, so being the UP chapter, I had a conversation with them, and then they said that, after 1996, apparently a school was set up, and I told her, I remember the setting of that school. There was a big competition. There were a lot of people, a lot of politicians came and everything else, and my own grandfather went there for the inauguration and everything else. So it was general that how exactly that school is faring now, and what exactly is the condition. So in general, around in 2019, that is much before the pandemic, so I was there, and in general we were having a general discussion, and those people were coming around, and we said what is the strength of the students coming, and especially with regard to how many boys, how many girls. So what was that in the school, it starts the 7 years, it started admitting students from the age of 7 years. I don't know what's the reason for that, but basically I think below that the thing's too small to bring them. So basically 6 and 7 that the students start admitting. The boys continue their education, and because the school is till 10th standard, so till 10th standard they study there. Then they go to a little farther away, that is an IFCO. Again, a small, it's more of a kind of a industrial hub, and there are a few schools there. So after 10th, the boys goes to that IFCO school. Now I thought, okay, fine. That means at least the girls are educated till 10th standard. To my utter shock and horror, maximum girls drop out at the age of 11 and 12. So I really thought that why this age of 11 and 12? And then we started talking to few people there. So name withheld, one of the girls' mother, she came to me and she said, ki, Bitiya, tum to isi gaon ki ho, and you know the conditions here. So jab ladki sayani ho jati hai, and here the word sayani has to mean that when the girl becomes hit puberty, basically start menstruating, then hum usko school nahi bhej sakte, hum usko aur ladkon ke sath nahi padha sakte hain. We cannot let when a girl becomes mature to let them be educated with boys. It is not safe. And the moment the girl gets mature, what we need to find them is find them a boy and get married. So in that village, in my village, which supposedly I always thought to be, really to a progressive extent, because in my house I had electricity, I had fridge, TV. From a very small age, I saw everything in that house. So I never thought that as a village house, it has all the necessary amenities. All my aunts, cousins, uncles, we all are very well educated. So for me, I didn't have that picture in my mind. So when I said that, why do you let the girls are so young, let them study. So he was here, and then she was like, कि क्या कर लेगी पढ़ के, फिर आपको पता नहीं है इतना दूर स्कूल होता है, हमें तो उनकी सिक्योरिटी भी सोचनी पड़ती है. We don't have good toilets also. You don't know when they have to go to 100 meters, then also how scared we are that what will happen, because ये जो बाहर का लड़का होता है, इसको तो they think we are basically what they wanted to say, that the upper caste doesn't regard them as to be individuals. For them, they are just for their enjoyment. So, and then another starting realities that, though you won't associate with Dalits, you won't associate with those Parsi people, you don't let them in the class in the same house, you won't let them enter your house. But when it comes to assault, sexual assault, that's okay, that's completely fine. That's absolutely normal for them. And in the girls between the age of 12 to 15, it's general in India that 10 out of 9 girls face sexual harassment and sexual assault. So that was also there. That was there too. That is fine. And the maximum assault and harassment is from their own community, obviously, because of this Dalit woman is being marginalized, not because she's just Dalit belonging to the most what you regard as the downward community, the most downtrodden community in India, but also because she's a woman, a Dalit woman, a poor Dalit woman. So as Kimberly Crenshaw said, the best example of intersectionality which plays with regard to women is example of an Indian poor Dalit women. So she has been targeted because she's a woman, the inherent patriarchy of our society. She's been targeted because she's Dalit. She's been targeted because she's poor. So there is this entire thing. So I am not coming to what effects it had when the pandemic hit us and how it changed everything. When pandemic hit us, there was another level. When the pandemic hit us, the question was not education. The question was the basic survival, the food. And then this organization, another working with the child marriage in UP itself. I'm not talking about anything in UP itself. 1 out of 5 girls is married before 12, and 4 out of 10 girls are married before the age of 16. So that is the true realities of our Indian rural women, that what exactly they face. They doesn't face only that they lack education, they lack everything. They lack the basic necessity. We saw in pandemic, we also saw the ugly side of the infrastructure, the failing of the healthcare system, the entire infrastructure. They've been deprived of food, basic, 2 meals a day, not 3 meals a day, 2 meals a day that have been deprived of. And when we come to education, so most of women, if you see the percentage in India, around in 2012, a survey was done, there's around 250 million Dalits. And no, there has not been a very exact kind of a survey, but it has been said that by then there were around 100 million women. And out of that 100 million women, 76.4% are illiterate. That means illiterate implying that they don't even know how to write their names. They don't know how to even hold a pencil in their hand. They have not even seen the door of a school. So this is
please conclude. Please conclude.
Yeah, so I'm just in the end only. So this is our harsh realities. So when we say, okay, fine, we are aware about these harsh realities, what to do about them? See, the first thing, Sanjay sir, being such an eminent name in sociology, have been done so much on caste discrimination and stratification, will understand that this issue is something which again needs a lot of time to come to change the mentalities, to change, to actually grow out of this caste system. The second thing which I feel from being a law student student is some changes in our law system itself. For example, the Child Marriage Act 2006, which only makes a child marriage voidable, not void. Voidable implying that the children, these children who are married before are turning majority, can avoid or annul their marriage once they attain puberty. But the question here is, we don't need annulment when they attain majority. What we require is from the day one that their marriage should be declared as void. Because see what these people think, that ठीक है लड़की सयानी हो गई, अब उसको उसके घर भेज देंगे, she will live with इज्जत से रहेगी, she will live there comfortably. So when they know that even if they marry the 12, 13, 14-year-old girl, it won't be a valid marriage. She won't get the respect in society. So we might see that there's a decrease in child by the early marriages, which is a problem for, a lot of things which are related to early marriages. And apart from that, we might see a change. And the second solution which I found is that if we could have all girls schools at least in rural areas. There's a need for all girls school in rural areas, making those parents more comfortable in sending their girls to those schools, though there will be less chances of sexual harassment, or their fears are a little subdued. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Samreen. In fact, you have taken the case of Dalit women from a particular case study of your village. And that's very important to see because today, just after 75 years of our journey of independent India, still we are talking about such type of discriminations and all that is important. But what's more important, that such type of discriminations, in fact, you can visualize there in United States of America. You can visualize there in certain important countries of Europe also. So it's not as if just by developing certain important mechanisms, we can get rid of that. But maybe certain inherent things are there in the whole social process that it's not either this particular society, maybe they are bringing another important societal component subjected to certain harsh realities, in fact, and that will always there. Because inequality is always a very fundamental, in fact, you can say feature of any of the society, but in what form it is expressed, that's important. In our setup, it has expressed there in the form of caste, along with other difficulties. And in other important societies, such type of forms, in fact, they are different ones. So it's a nice presentation from your side. Thank you. And I'm very thankful to all the presenters, in fact, and they have concluded their presentations well within the time. So now I request Dr. Naseem Ahmed to please conclude the proceedings of this session in very brief. Naseem is there.
Sir, मैं थोड़ा सा डॉक्टर समरीन से थोड़ा सा कंफ्यूज हो रहा हूं, मैं उनके टाइटल को लेके, क्या मैं जान सकता हूं, क्वेश्चन पूछ सकता हूं डॉक्टर समरीन?
जी सर, बिल्कुल
सर। आप मैम, आपका टॉपिक ग्लोबलाइजेशन एंड इम्पैक्ट ऑन दलित वुमेन इन इंडिया, क्या कोई, मैं थोड़ा सा इसको लेके परेशान हो रहा हूं, क्या जो दलित वुमेन इन इंडिया है, क्या वुमेन्स पर कोई फर्क पड़ रहा है कि मुस्लिम वुमेन्स या जनरल के वुमेन्स है, कि ग्लोबलाइजेशन का दोनों पे क्या अलग अलग इम्पैक्ट है?
सबका बिल्कुल सर, सबका अलग इम्पैक्ट है। ग्लोबलाइजेशन का
तरह की क्या एम्पिरिकल स्टडीज तरह की हुई है जो अलग अलग
बिल्कुल हुई है सर? जी सर, बिल्कुल हुई है। ग्लोबलाइजेशन का एक जनरल इफेक्ट विमेन पे होना, ग्लोबलाइजेशन का एक जनरल इफेक्ट मुस्लिम विमेन पे, ग्लोबलाइजेशन का एक जनरल इफेक्ट दलित वुमेन पे जो कि पुअर है, दलित वुमेन जो रूरल एरिया में रह रही है, दलित वुमेन जो अर्बन एरिया में रह रही है, मुस्लिम वुमेन जो रूरल एरिया में रह रही है, मुस्लिम वुमेन जो अर्बन एरिया में रह रही है। सब बहुत डिफरेंस है इसके अंदर। बहुत सारी ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस हैं जो इसमें काम कर रही हैं। वन ऑफ दोस ऑर्गेनाइजेशन इज परी, अनदर ऑर्गेनाइजेशन इज आकांक्षा, जो बेसिकली यूपी में काम कर रही हैं, जो हमको डिफरेंस समझाती हैं। जब आप इलाहाबाद, जो कि एक तरह से हम उसको अर्बन तो नहीं कहेंगे, लेकिन फिर भी रूरल नहीं कहलाएगा इलाहाबाद, और इलाहाबाद से आप वही 50 किलोमीटर दूर फूलपुर के जिस छोटे सी जगह की मैं बात कर रही, वहां की बात करेंगे। सो यू विल सी द डिफरेंस बिटवीन दोस टू इटसेल्फ, and it shows you the two realities of our own India, our independent India. So, for example, what in Allahabad a Dalit girl or a Dalit woman was facing with regard to education, if you're talking about, was excess with regard to key, because she was poor. So as a lot of people discuss, it was internet problem. It was problem that there were 3 kids of that one family having one phone or just one laptop, or those things. But when we come to the rural world, the problem is not that they don't have the internet, or that's something beyond 2020 और 21 में वहां पे कुछ हुआ ही नहीं. उन्होंने पढ़ाई नहीं, उनके लिए पढ़ाई बंद हो गई थी, चाहे वो women हो चाहे वो men हो. उनके लिए जो more important issues was that how to study beyond 12 years of age, beyond when they start menstruating, beyond the words that they are not being married, because the moment a girl start menstruating, the parents start thinking now she has to get married. So for her to get that basic education from 6 to 14 years is a struggle. That to actually get away from that early marriage is a struggle. The same struggle is not for a Dalit girl who might be living in Noida or in Allahabad.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
You can understand it from a very different perspective. Professor Gopal Guru has initiated a debate. Dalit women talks differently, meaning thereby women as a important, what you can say, segment is not at all a homogeneous segment. Dalit women do have 2 types of atrocities in front of her. One, being a Dalit, she is getting all the subjugations and problems from the caste system. This is one. Second, she is a woman, and that's why the patriarchy is also depriving her of number of things. So whatever problems a upper caste women is facing is only the issue from the patriarchal system. But as far as the Dalit women, she is getting 2 types of problems. One, from patriarchy, other from being a lower caste, she is getting that second type of discrimination. And that's why her challenges towards the whole process of globalization, in fact, becomes manifold. And that's why she has to cope up with that particular whole process in a very different way. And that's why her deprivation, in fact, what I say, it becomes multi-layered. That's the problem, and that's the issue. So now I request you to please summarize, and then after that, I'll take only 3-4 minutes to say something. That's all.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you. Before submission, I would like to share my views on the topic. The COVID-19 pandemic has break bane of the world, disrupting our lives and livelihood. From the middle of March 2020, all enrolled students of school, colleges, and universities have been unable to attend classes due to limitations set of control of spread of the coronavirus. As a result, students have been staying at home for years without any form of formal education. Under these conditions, there is a considerable possibility of high dropout rate from school, colleges, and universities in 2020 to 2022. In India, which has a patriarchal family structure where boys are still prioritized over girls in terms of imparting education, dropout rate for female students during and after the epidemic could be significantly higher than for boys. It is crucial to highlight it that while many countries closed their school, some countries including Singapore, Sweden, Brazil, and Australia maintain their school open as a form of contingent control approach. As a result, we can argue that if we can devise a good strategy, we will be able to combat pandemic and other challenges. Now that most countries have been immunized, we must set up our efforts to provide high quality education. With these words, I would like to round up my point of view. I feel honored to be part of such amazing presentation with the consent of the chairperson, Professor Sanjay Singh sir. I would like to congratulate all the participants of this session, that is Devanshi Singh, Riponte Day, Nishan Singh, Dr. Ankita, Almika Bora, Ashish, Dr. Mittal, Insha Yadav, Dr. Samreen, who presented very good papers covering all the aspects of today's title. I also congratulate the organizing committee who conducted a wonderful seminar on a very significant topic in very well manner. I would want to congratulate all And thanks Dr. Prem Kumar Gautam and Dr. Abdullah Nasir for providing me with this opportunity. Thank you, Sanjay sir. I learned a lot from your company. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Just I'll take only 2-3 more minutes, in fact, and to summarize the things. Session was there on education accessibility and impact of pandemic. And the broader theme was the emerging issues in law and justice with reference to globalization. So when we perceive India, I always think there are 3 important challenges that we can perceive at present. First, the demand made on legal institutions. So number of demands, in fact, they are there with reference to the whole process of globalization on the legal institutions. Legal institutions, you can perceive it with reference to the structures. For example, the different legal structures that you can perceive, courts, number of other important domains. You can include certain important frames from the government also. Second, what's the response of these legal institutions? That's another important thing. Demands, they are there in front of them. How they are reacting to that. There's another very important aspect. And the third is how that reaction is converting into a process, is converting into an impact, whether it's having any impact or not. So that's the third one. Not only that, you can perceive that whole process with reference to the structural, substantive, and the cultural domain. And the cultural domain is all more important because values and attitudes, they are important, and they determine the place of legal system in any of the cultural frames. When I take the theoretical models, 2 very important theoreticians of the present time period, Habermas, one, and second, Nicholas Luhmann. Habermas takes the modernist perspective to understand the responses of law vis-a-vis this whole globalization process. And when you perceive his writings, in fact, what I always say is the proper person, in fact, to understand the debate between the civil society, state, and the present day economic order. So the moment you go through that, what he's having to his credit that the law is going to be a very important institution, in fact, in the whole debate. But later on, what he finds that whatever normative structures they are there, they're also taken the course to by the global forces, the market forces. So what to do with that? Counter to this, Nicholas Luhmann, what he says, no, the stage at which we have reached, the law and the legal institutions, they are so mature that one very important word he uses, autopoietic. Law becomes an autopoietic, meaning thereby it's creating its own networks. And that's why whatever processes of globalization, whatever economic and market impacts they are there, to a certain extent, they are countered by law. So for the first time, just after serving nearly 15 years in the law university, after going through the present day debates, I'm very much fascinated by the importance of law and the legal institutions in the whole maintenance of the proper social order. So that's why whatever emerging issues and challenges they are there, vis-a-vis globalization, in fact, this is very important, in fact, and very contemporary to see that, yes, law do have a very important role to play. And when such type of challenges they are there, how these legal institutions, in fact, they are responding and what impact, in fact, they are creating in a social system as a whole. This is very important to see. I congratulate all the presenters. In fact, they were all young presenters and they have taken the course to the right to education. That's fun. But how that right to education has led to the present day new education policy. I'm unaware of new education policy. Number of people they are talking about, number of seminars, in fact, they are going on. But what's the connection between that right to education and this new education policies? They must come up with that also. Not only this, 3 other important presentations, in fact, from the economic perspective by Dr. Mitali Tiwari, the psychological perspective by Dr. Isha Yadav, and Samreen has taken the course to my favorite topic. And all three presentations, in fact, they were all very insightful. And we should take these different dimensions also, in fact, to understand the things. So I must congratulate Dr. Prem Kumar Gautam, along with his team, in organizing such a organized seminar. So I also must be very thankful to Dr. Naseem Ahmed. In fact, the moment he was there, I was very relaxed that I need not to do much of the homework, in fact. And so thank you, dear. Thank you. So over to the organizers, please. Yeah, Oman, please. You are mute. You are mute.
Just a minute. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Fine. So it brings me an immense pleasure to conclude the technical session 3, that is education accessibility and impact of pandemic. I would like to formally share my thanks to all those who have contributed their time and thoughts in this event. I would begin by extending my gratitude to our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor S.K. Bhatnagar sir, for providing space and encouragement to host events like this so as to have an intellectual discussion. Our deepest gratitude to Professor Dr. Sanjay Singh sir, chairperson to this technical session, for taking out some valuable time from his busy schedule, and co-chair Dr. Naseem Ahmed sir for his insightful views on the topic. I would also like to thank our convener, Dr. Prem Kumar Gautam sir, and other members of organizing committee, Dr. Mitali Tiwari, Dr. Abdullah Nasir sir, Ms. Priya Anuragini, Dr. Alka Singh, and Dr. Bhanu Pratap sir, and all student coordinators for their requisite contribution. So as to conclude, let me once again reiterate my gratitude to all your precious times and golden words. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Naseem.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. It's my privilege, sir. Thank you.